60% of Americans having a chronic disease, people are wasting more and more time in doctors' offices, doctors' waiting rooms. Tucson Functional Medicine offers health programs to get to the cause of your health issue, so you can spend less time in waiting rooms and more time enjoying the quality of life that you deserve. So welcome. Like I say, this is a big topic. I did this webinar, I put this webinar together several years ago when we really started dealing with osteoporosis. And so we got some statistics that I didn't verify, but we're still real close to it. So number one, I decided that I believe that all diseases are reversible. And so a bunch of years ago, some patients came in with osteoporosis, and I just couldn't accept what the normal model was telling us. So what is the traditional thinking about what causes and how you can prevent getting osteopenia or osteoporosis? So this is the common accepted knowledge: calcium and exercise, which is called Wolff's Law. And Wolff's Law basically says that stress to the bones will build stronger cortical margins in the bone. That's only true when you're a child. That's not true as you get to be an adult. Now, exercise is important, and we'll talk about that as we go along, but does exercise as an adult build stronger cortical margins in the bone? No, it does not. So this is an actual ad put out by the Dairy Association, and I put a big red circle around what they're actually promoting, and that is drinking milk, right? Calcium. And the premise of this is bones are made of calcium. That's why we need calcium. And you do need calcium, but you need a lot more than calcium. And if calcium and exercise was the solution to this, we consume the most, we'll go over this, but we consume the most calcium in the world, but yet we are one of the highest rated countries for osteoporosis. So basically, this is the Dairy Association telling us to drink our milk. And if your mom was like my mom, what did she tell me as I was a kid growing up? Drink your milk so you grow up and have big, strong bones. So now, like I said, this was done about 3 or 4 years ago, so I didn't check to make sure that we are still the #1 country of consuming calcium, but we are right up there if we're not #1. But at the time this was done, I think it's about 4 years ago, the United States was the country that consumed the most calcium in the world. And if calcium prevents osteoporosis, why is the US in the top 5 countries in the world with osteoporosis? That doesn't make any logical sense. But what we basically do, I'm not against calcium, but we're already consuming the most in the world, but yet we have all this osteoporosis. And so if calcium really did prevent osteoporosis, since we consume the most, we should be at the bottom of the list of countries that have osteoporosis, but yet we're in the top 5. So maybe calcium is not at the end all. I mean, calcium's important. Through milk, is that the best way to get calcium? No. But how prevalent is osteoporosis in America? In women over the age of 50, 1 in 3 will get osteoporosis. In men over the age of 50, it's 1 in 5. So it is a little bit more of a woman-dominant disease, but men get it. You know, I mean, there's a basic theory out there that if you're a man, you don't really need to worry about osteoporosis. That's just not true. 55% of Americans over the age of 50 have either osteopenia, bone thinning, or osteoporosis. That's when we're worried about fractures. So that equates out to 54 million Americans. So what actually is osteopenia and osteoporosis? What actually causes this? It's a breakdown in what is called the bone remodeling process. And we're going to go over what that is. So what bone remodeling is, every day, everybody is creating all these micro fractures in their bones. Hundreds, thousands of these every single day. So osteoclasts, these are the ones that break bone down, they come along and they break down the sections of bone that have little microfractures in them. And then the osteoblasts, these are the ones that add bone. They come along and fill in the broken down sections where those microfractures used to be with new bone. And this what keeps our bones strong over the course of our life. We must have portions of our bones broken down every day, and then we must have those portions of the bone filled in, and that's what keeps our bones strong. If we didn't have the osteoclasts, the bone breaker downers, doing this, all those little microfractures over years and years and years would begin to add up, and they wouldn't be microfractures anymore, and pretty soon they'd be major fractures. So they both play a key part in this bone remodeling process. So this is a picture of an osteoclast, okay? They actually are the ones that go in and break down bone. So here we got the osteoblasts on the left side of the screen. I think it's on the left for you too. And so basically they're both working together all the time. The osteoclasts are in there breaking the portions of bone down that have the little microfractures in it. And the osteoblasts are in there filling those little spaces up with new bone. So we're going to talk about what is possible. Basically, our medical philosophy has focused 100% on osteoclasts, the bone destroyers. And sometimes that is the cause. Sometimes that is the cause. But a lot of times it's the relationship between the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, and the osteoblasts, the bone builders. And we have to have a balance between those two. And that's what gets thrown off. And when the balance gets thrown off, what do we result? It results in osteopenia and then eventually osteoporosis. So the first thing that we need is we need to avoid osteoporosis in the first place, right? And so what does the body actually need to build, to prevent osteoporosis from happening? We need calcium, that is important. We need magnesium. We need vitamin D. We need vitamin K2. We need alpha lipoic acid. We need berberine. We need good fats, protein, and strength training exercises, because exercise is very, very important as we get older for keeping our strength up. And what exercise does as we get older is it doesn't build the cortical margin, but it prevents the cortical margin from thinning as fast as not doing exercise. So it actually makes our bones remain strong longer because of the building of the muscles and the movement of the bone. This idea that exercise builds bone as we get older, builds the cortical margins to be stronger, is just not true. It is as a child. A lot of people we find, and I think this is going to get worse and worse and worse, because kids now sit in front of a computer screen or on their phone or whatever. And when I was a kid, maybe you guys were kids, we went outside and played all the time. So we built very good, strong bones when we were children. And the real question is, now that the kids aren't really exercising as much as they used to, are they building weaker bones as children? Therefore, we will start to result in more osteopenia and osteoporosis as they age. We don't know, but that makes sense, because the stronger the bones you build when you're a child, the less likely you are to get weaker bones as you get older. So that's what we need to try to prevent osteopenia from happening in the first place. So basically, what we've been told is calcium. Well, there's a bunch of other stuff that we actually need, okay? But now what we're going to do is we're going to talk about what we actually need to do to actually prevent and actually strengthen osteopenia or osteoporotic bones. This can be done. We do it all the time. So this definitely can be done. So if you're working with somebody currently, excuse me, if you're working with somebody currently with osteopenia or osteoporosis, we're going to go over all the tests that need to be done to actually determine what is the cause of your osteopenia or osteoporosis. This idea of lumping everybody in the, oh, you need more calcium box it's just not going to work. Well, obviously it's not working. We have 54 million Americans above the age of 50 that have osteopenia or osteoporosis. So the model isn't working. We need a new model. So the tests that we're going to talk about, what's really underneath all this stuff. If you're working with somebody, we will be uploading this. You'll get the link for the replay. We'll also be uploading this on our YouTube channel. Tucson Functional Medicine is our YouTube channel. And I would watch it. I would write the tests down or write them down as we go through them right now, and make sure that the person that you're working on them, on your osteopenia or osteoporosis with, actually is looking at all this. Because if they're not, you're going to be the loser. So we need to find out what is actually causing the breakdown in your remodeling process. Is it the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, destroying too much bone? That's possible. Is it the osteoblasts, the bone builders, building bone that's not strong? And we'll also talk about bisphosphonates, which is the drug, the Boniva, the Fosamax. We'll talk about those. And there's a lot of bad research about those. And actually they're building the cortical margin, but the bone is not strong. And then there's some other problems with jaw necrosis and stuff like that that we'll talk about. So basically what underlies the breakdown of the remodeling process? This is what causes osteopenia and osteoporosis to start with. The number one thing is stress. And you can't really separate stress and inflammation, but we have for this purpose so that you can kind of see some major causes of each one of these. And then catabolic metabolism, and we'll talk about what that is. And then a lot of prescription. There is a lot of prescriptions that people get put on for other things that is causing a breakdown in that remodeling process. So we're going to take these 1, 2, 3, 4, then we're going to talk about the tests, the actual tests that need to be run so that we can find out what is undermining your bones to start with. So the first reason that the bone remodeling process breaks down is stress. Now, stress has become so normal in this country that most people don't think they're stressed. And that's because we've just adapted to a level of stress that is way higher than what we need. And stress can be real or perceived. We're going to watch a little movie here in a minute that will show you a difference of a perceived stress that wasn't even real, but it caused this person to get all stressed. So stress, everybody deals with it, right? We all have it. It has become so normal that people realistically do not think that they are stressed at all anymore. So when we think of stress, we think of the saber-toothed tiger, right? Run away from the saber-toothed tiger. Well, to the best of my knowledge, we don't have saber-toothed tigers anymore. But what we do have are all these new things that we name different things that our body responds to exactly like running away from the saber-toothed tiger. So our modern day saber-toothed tigers are husbands and wives and kids and parents and harassment and stress and mortgages and deadlines and conflict and debt, anxiety, taxes, the coronavirus, right? We have all these things that now is stress, and most Americans are stressed all day long. They don't realize it much anymore because this has become so normal. So this movie right here, it's kind of humorous and kind of funny, but it'll show you, because remember, perceived stress is as bad in the reaction by the body as real stress. So if I see a saber-toothed tiger in front of me, my body reacts. If I think there's a saber-toothed tiger out in the parking lot hiding behind my car, my body reacts exactly the same way to the perception of stress.
Well, I'm at the airport and they've got this deal for 5 donuts for $5, which is an awesome deal because it's pretty much the same price as buying 3 donuts anyway, so it doesn't matter. And I set my stuff down and I pick up the paper and I start reading the paper, and this guy sits down across from me. And so I, look over the paper and he kind of gives me a bit of a smile and give him a bit of a nod, and I go back to reading the business section. A little while later, I hear this rustling on the table, and I'm like, I look over, and the guy's got his hand in the bag of donuts. Okay, that's a bit weird, but it doesn't really matter. The guy looks like he's homeless. He probably needs it more than I do. And I've still got 4 donuts anyways, and I'm not going to eat all 4 donuts, so what do I care? So I reach in the bag, and I grab a donut, and I start eating it. And I go back to reading the paper. So I'm just getting into the social pages, and I hear this rustling on the table again. And I look over, and the guy's got his hand in the bag of donuts again. He takes a bite, and I'm like, what the crap? Now I'm getting a bit angry, but the precedent has been set, and so I don't feel like I can say anything. But I reach into the bag a bit more aggressively, I take a bite, and I just shake my head like, whatever. So a few minutes have gone by, and there's this call on the loudspeaker for the next departure, and the guy gets up and he starts yelling all this stuff. And he gets to the end of the table, and he stops. And I see him out of the corner of my eye, and he reaches into the bag, and he pulls up the last donut. And I'm like, seriously? And he looks at me, he breaks it in 2, and he hands it to me. I reach out, and I take this half, and I'm in total disbelief. And he kind of nods at me, and he walks off. So while I'm sitting here pondering the absurdity of what's just happened, I hear the call for my flight. And so I get up, and I grab my bag, and I grab my jacket. And under my jacket is my bag of donuts. Not only was I eating that guy's donuts the whole time, and he didn't say anything, he took out his last donuts, and he broke it in half and gave it to me.
So I love that video. And the reason I love that video is because it shows how the perception of a situation can result in exactly the same response. So this guy was getting all stressed out over the other guy eating his donuts. So the same response goes on, and then he finds out it wasn't the other guy eating his donuts, it was actually him eating the other guy's donuts, but the reaction was exactly the same. The fight or flight mechanism kicks in, cortisol, epinephrine, norepinephrine, all the catecholamines that are issued from the body when we're under stress. And I think the most important thing to realize is the stress doesn't even have to be real. So I tell people this story. About a year ago, I shut my office down at 2 o'clock. We start at 6 o'clock in the morning. And one of the reasons I do this is because I live a long ways away from Tucson, and I want to try to miss rush hour as much as I can. So I know that if I can't get out of the office before 2:30 in the afternoon, I'm going to be stuck on the street because all the schools are letting out. And all the mothers are there picking their children up from school. So it's about 2:35. I'm still at the office. I look up at the clock and I see this and I think, I'm going to be stuck on the road for an hour waiting for all of those mothers to pick up their kids. So what was I doing? I was now all stressed out about how it's going to take me so much longer to get home. And I'm, wah. I get out on the road and I start heading down the road and there's nothing on the road. And I'm thinking, what is going on? Then it dawns on me. It was a holiday and the schools were closed. But that didn't stop me from being all stressed out about it, even though that was completely irrational. It was completely wrong. Kids weren't even at school. And here I'm getting stressed out because I'm going to have to wait on the road. And so that was a perception of stress, just like that guy with the donuts. It was a perception of stress that never came to reality, but I activated the whole fight or flight system. And we do this all the time. Sometimes it's real stress, and sometimes it's perceived stress. So stress is huge because when, and we'll talk about this here in a little bit, but when we're stressed, we kick out what are called catecholamines. And catecholamines are cortisol and epinephrine and norepinephrine and dopamine. And one of the things that these catecholamines stimulate is a thing called RANKL. And we're going to talk about that in a few slides. But RANKL stimulates osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to break down more bone. So when we're stressed, the natural response to stress, whether it's real or imagined stress, causes this enzyme or this molecule called RANKL to stimulate the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to break more bone down. So number 2, inflammation. Now there's lots of places we can get inflammation from, but an amazing amount of it is coming from the digestive tract. Now, according to the AMA, I think it was the AMA or the FDA, 50% of the people that have bacterial overgrowth in their digestive systems have absolutely no digestive symptoms at all. So we have a system that really doesn't test anything until we have a symptom. But if 50% of the people have digestive issues, but they don't have a symptom, why would we ever test it? In our system, we wouldn't. But inflammation, an enormous amount of inflammation comes from bacterial overgrowth in the digestive tract. And so that's why we show it. You can get inflammation from other areas too, but this is the biggie. This is the 800-pound gorilla in the room. The digestive system, and most Americans' digestive systems is not good. We're eating on the run. Oh, stress again. We're eating on the run. I read an article, I think it was a year ago, and they were saying that families that still have children at home are eating an average of 9 meals a week at a fast food joint. So eating has become something that either is done in a rush, or we're eating stuff that probably isn't healthy for us as part of our social network. So we get together with our buddies after work and we go have a beer and pizza or hot wings or whatever. And so most of our eating is not done for health. It's done for either enjoyment or convenience. So the digestive issues is huge in dealing with osteoporosis and osteopenia. Inflammation causes catabolic metabolism. That's the next one we're going to talk about. And inflammation also stimulates those catecholamines that we just talked about, which is what stimulates that RANKL that stimulates the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to go out and break more bone down. So inflammation and stress go hand in hand. And if you don't deal with both of those issues, you don't have any real chance of getting on top of osteopenia or osteoporosis. This is that RANKL. It's an osteoclast, the bone destroyer, signaling molecule. So now part of the bone remodeling process is the osteoblasts, the bone builders, actually emit some RANKL. And that RANKL goes and tells the osteoclast to keep working and breaking bone down, because that's the natural bone remodeling process. The osteoclasts need to be working continuously, breaking down those microfractures, and the osteoblasts need to be working continually to build those sections of the bone that were eliminated to rebuild strong bone. So RANKL is not a negative thing, and it's part of the whole bone remodeling. But stress and inflammation stimulates that RANKL, too much of it, which then cause the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to break down more bone. So that's the major mechanism that happens with stress and inflammation. Now, stress and inflammation also creates a catabolic metabolism. We'll talk about that next here. So the third reasons to break down that bone remodeling process is catabolic metabolism. So catabolic means taking bigger things and breaking them down into smaller things. Anabolism or anabolic takes smaller things and builds them together to make bigger things. Now, neither one are all good or all bad. We use both of these systems all the time. It's like RANKL. RANKL is not bad. It's just when we get too much RANKL, it becomes bad. So let's think about eating. Eating is a catabolic issue. We take bigger bites of food and we break them down smaller and smaller and smaller so that they can get into the bloodstream and be taken around to the cells in our body, to what's called the mitochondria, which is just the energy plant in the cells. Here in Tucson, we have TEP. That's our energy plant, just the name of the company. Every cell in your body, and you have trillions of these, all have their own little energy plant, and it's called the mitochondria. And if we didn't use catabolism, catabolic, breaking things down, we would never get the food particles broken down small enough to get into the bloodstream to feed that energy plant to make energy. So catabolic is not a bad thing. What happens is when our body becomes too catabolic. So catabolic could also be taking bones and breaking them down into smaller bones, causing osteopenia and osteoporosis. So we need a balance between catabolic and anabolic. So this is another thing that must be addressed in the treatment of osteopenia and osteoporosis, or again, we have no real chance of solving the problem. And for years, we take people. Now, is this a fast process? It's not. It wasn't a fast process that caused the breakdown of the bone. So it's not a fast process. But we have lots of people that after a year, their markers are better. After 2 years, they're better. After 3 years, they're better. There's a guy by the name of Keith McCormick, and he is a chiropractor. I believe he lives back east. I'm not exactly sure where, but back east somewhere. And he was on the Olympic track and field team. He ran in the pentathlon, and then he was a Ironman triathlete. And so he was working out when he was 45 years old. He was working out, and he had this pain in his hip. And he went in to see what was going on, and they told him he had severe osteoporosis. And he was totally confused. He's a guy. Well, guys don't get osteoporosis. 2, he was an athlete. Exercise helps bones and keeps them strong and all that. 45 years old, he has serious osteoporosis. And I believe he broke 12 bones in 5 years. He now is back to doing Ironman triathlons because he studied osteoporosis. And this is where a lot of my understanding of osteoporosis came from. I hooked up with him years ago under osteoporosis. I had a patient come in and ask me about osteoporosis, and I knew what I was taught in school. Drink milk, exercise, and you won't have this problem. And that's really all I knew. And so I really got into him, and he really taught me an enormous amount about osteoporosis. So Keith McCormick is his name, and he is probably the United States expert on osteoporosis. And I learned an enormous amount from him about osteoporosis, osteopenia, to be able to help my patients. So are the prescriptions that you're taking causing bone loss? This is another thing you never hear anything about. So can the drugs that you're on for other things raise your risk of osteoporosis? Now, I'm not going to read all these to you, but these are just some of the drugs that have been directly tied to osteopenia and osteoporosis. So let's just talk about one real quick. Heartburn drugs, number 4. These are called PPIs, or protein pump inhibitors. So the premise of these drugs is to block the pumps in your stomach that create hydrochloric acid. Well, you need hydrochloric acid to be absorbed K, D, calcium. And if we're blocking the production of acid so you don't have heartburn, we're actually creating a problem with being able to absorb a lot of the vitamins and minerals that you need to build good, strong bones. So it just goes on and on and on. And the list is a lot longer than this, but these are just some of them. These are the big ones. These are the top 15 that are listed. There are more than this. So we need to be cautious and conscious of the drugs that we're taking. Are they working against, to solve this problem over here, are they working against our bone strength and our bone rigidity and not breaking, right? So let's talk a little bit about what are called bisphosphonates. And there's many of them. The most common ones is Boniva and Fosamax and things like this. So what they discovered after putting people on these medications was that their cortical margin, the actual strong part of the bone, was getting bigger. And they thought, well, this is wonderful. So these bones are getting better. They're working great. But what they found was the bones were actually fragile, because what these bisphosphonates actually do is they block the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, from breaking down bone. And if you block it too much, we're not breaking down bone. So therefore all these microfractures continue. And then pretty soon the bones get actually weaker, because the bisphosphonates are actually preventing the osteoclasts, bone destroyers, from doing their part of that bone remodeling. So it doesn't actually solve the problem. And then it's not super common, but there is a huge problem with these drugs, and they just keep getting stronger and stronger. There's a bunch of them out there now. And it's called jawbone necrosis. Okay, it's the mandible bone in the jaw, and what can actually happen is these bisphosphonates can actually stop the osteoclast to such a point that people start getting erosion of the jawbone. And you lose the jawbones, eating becomes very, very difficult. Now, I'm not against bisphosphonates for some people. Depending upon what your T-score is, and we'll show you that test here in a minute, but if your T-score is high enough and you are at risk for breaking bones, I'm not against using bisphosphonates for a short period of time. Maybe 6 months to a year. Because I don't want your bones breaking while we're working at the underlying cause to fix the actual osteoporosis or osteopenia. So there is a time. But in our medical model, our traditional medical model, you get an osteopenia and they immediately want to put you on a bisphosphonate. And like I say, there's more than just Fosamax or Boniva, but those are the two that most people know the most about. And immediately they're putting them on that as a preventative so that you don't get osteopenia. And this is completely wrong, completely wrong. If you have osteoporosis and the number is high enough, depending upon where the osteopenia is, bisphosphonates might be a good option for a short period of time to prevent a break while we're working on the inflammation or the stress or the catabolic metabolism or whatever is the actual cause of your osteopenia or osteoporosis. Well, I guess it would be osteoporosis, because we would never put an osteopenia patient on a bisphosphonate. So now this is very, very important. If you're working with somebody now and they're not looking at this, they're never going to be able to help you build good, strong bones again. So there's two basic questions that we have to ask. One, what is causing the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to break down too much bone? Because there's many different things that can do this. We talked about stress and inflammation as being two huge ones, because they both stimulate that thing called RANKL. And that causes the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to break more bone down. So is your problem that the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, are working overtime and destroying so much bone that they can't keep up at building it up? That's a possibility. That's a possibility. And the traditional medical model, that's the one they always assume is the problem. But the second question is, are the osteoblasts, the bone builders, making good, strong bone? Because we know that the bisphosphonates, those drugs, Boniva, Fosamax, things like that, the bone that they're building isn't good, strong bone. So it doesn't necessarily mean we have to discover exactly what is causing your osteopenia or osteoporosis before we can really deal with it. And you're unique, you're different. You're not going to fit into the exact same box that everyone else on the surface of the earth who has osteopenia or osteoporosis do. So test number one, it's the bone scan, it's the DEXA. Now, if you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, you already had this test done. And here's how the numbers go. It's called a T-score. And if your T-score is negative 3.5 or higher, negative 4, negative 4.5, negative 5, that is the 3.5, negative 3.5 is the deciding point of osteopenia into osteoporosis. If it's below negative 3.5, so negative 3, negative 2.5, that is osteopenia, not yet osteoporosis. So if you came to me and we were going to work together on this, and you have a, let's just make something up, a T-score of negative 4.8 in your hip, we're going to put you on a bisphosphonate to try to help prevent a fracture while we're working at discovering exactly what's going on with your particular bone remodeling. So we're not against bisphosphonates. We just think they're used way too quickly and for way too long. Use them too long and you can actually get that jawbone necrosis, and we don't want that. So test number two. This is a test that looks very specifically at the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers. Are they breaking down too much bone? Are they working overtime? Doesn't tell us why they're working overtime. Could be stress, could be inflammation, could be the catabolic metabolism, but are they breaking down too much bone? There's three tests. There's a CTX, an NTX, and a DPD. We personally use the DPD in our clinic here, but they all three look at a different part of how the osteoclasts are working. But this test will tell you, are the osteoclasts breaking down too much bone? So it's either the CTX, the NTX, or the DPD, and there's three different tests. And I don't care which one a person uses, they need to be looking at, are the osteoclasts breaking down too much? So if you get put on a bisphosphonate and you do this test, this is a test that we sometimes run to see if the bisphosphonate is shutting the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, down too much. Because if it shuts them down too much, now we're not fixing those little microfractures in the bones, that whole bone remodeling. This third test is the bone formation. This is a test that looks at the osteoblasts, the bone builders. Are they building good, strong bone, and are they working correctly? And this is called a PNIP test, and it's, all of that, it's a protopeptide and all that kind of stuff. But basically, this is a test that takes a look at the osteoblasts, the bone builders. How are they doing? That's the other part of the equation. So we got to be looking at this too. Test 4, we can test your urine calcium levels. If your body is excreting too much calcium through the urine, we need calcium in the blood. And if we're peeing too much of this out, the body will stimulate the breakdown of bone to free up more calcium, so we have a sufficient level of calcium in the blood. So this is another test that we can look at, because maybe what we're having is a problem with keeping the calcium in the blood that we have, and so now we're breaking down bone to replace the calcium that we're urinating out. Another test that we need to be looking at. The adrenal test tells us about our stress level. So this is a test that we run on every one of our osteopenia and osteoporosis patients. And this is looking at cortisol. Now, cortisol is one of those catecholamines that cause the stimulation of that RANKL that causes the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to go break down more bone. So the public would call this adrenal fatigue and adrenal exhaustion and all this kind of stuff. But this is what it actually is. We take the test, stage 1 of adrenal fatigue or whatever you want to call it would be high cortisol, low DHEA. Stage 2, the cortisol is now falling. And so usually the cortisol will be in the normal range, but we know that's not normal because the DHEA is still low. Stage 3, and the public would call this adrenal exhaustion. These are the people that get tired walking up a flight of stairs. That's low cortisol and low DHEA. So this is a way that we can really look at the level of stress and how your body is responding to stress. So we run this test on every one of our osteoporosis, osteopenia patients. Remember inflammation, the biggest point of inflammation is the digestive tract. So we run what's called a SIBO test, which is a test for the small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. Then we also run a test called the GI map test. This is relatively new test using DNA technology to look at the large intestines. So it's looking at the microbiome, the bacteria that we should have in the digestive tract. Is it balanced? Do we have an overgrowth or an undergrowth? The second part of the test is how are the organs working in the digestion? How is the pancreas working? How is the gallbladder working? How is the intestinal tract interacting with the pancreas or whatever? And so it has a whole section of this test just looking at all the organs that are involved in the large intestines. Then the third part of the test, which makes up about half of the test, is looking at all the bugs that shouldn't be in there at all. And if we do have bugs, if we have Helicobacter, which is the bacterial infection that grows ulcers. Oh, look at that. I got capital T with a small t right next to it. Bugs, that should not be there. And so what happens with those is any bug that is in there that shouldn't be in there is affecting our digestion of food. So these are the two main tests that we run for inflammation. We also run a blood test because there are markers on the blood test that can tell us about inflammation too. But these are what we're looking at. But what we're basically looking at here, let me see if I can make my marker work. I don't know, see if this will work. No. Okay, I don't know. The bottom three on the right-hand side of your screen, it's HSCRP, homocysteine, and fibrinogen. Every one of these is an inflammation marker, and the only one that is really looked at on a traditional doctor's blood report is the CRP, the C-reactive protein. And that is important, we should look at that. But there's two other markers, homocysteine and fibrinogen, that also tell us a lot about the inflammation in the body. All these other ones are specific to osteoporosis for different reasons. And like I said, we just don't have enough time. But in the kidney ones, over here on the left, in the middle, BUN and creatinine, maybe we've got a problem in our kidney, and that's why we're excreting. See, calcium should be reabsorbed through the kidneys. But if we have damage in the kidneys, it may not reabsorb the calcium through the kidneys and put it back in the blood, and it may just allow it to be urinated out. So maybe that's why we're urinating out too much calcium. So there's a lot of problems that we need to narrow down so that we can look at exactly what is causing your issue. Now, in the PDF handouts is the handout that I give to my patients to track their morning urine pH. And this is just a screenshot right off an Amazon website. It's just a digital pH meter. The reason we picked this one is it was cheap. Okay, you can spend $50, $60 on these pH meters and you just don't need anything, but you need a meter. You don't need the paper, the pH paper, because you never know really what the number is if you're using the paper. So this is one we recommend, but any of the actual digital pH meters, you can probably buy them at Walgreens. I don't know, but get it at Amazon for sure. And if your morning urine pH is below 6.4, your body is acidic. And if you're acidic, you're catabolic. And if you're catabolic, you're breaking more bone down. So this is something that you can use every single day. So in the PDF handouts, and you should already have the email, I set it up to be sent to you at 12:30. There is the form in there, and we actually give you a graph that you can actually, mine is taped right to the wall, right behind the bathroom in my master bedroom. And I still, to this day, for probably close to 15 years, I'm taking my urine pH every single morning. So I gave you the entire form in the PDFs. This is something that you can look at home for one particular area to find out if your body is too acidic. So basically, you need a 4-step plan. You need to make sure you have what you need to build the good, strong bones. And I gave you that, all those things, vitamin D, vitamin K, berberine, all these, alpha lipoic acid, all those things. If you don't have those, we don't have the building blocks to make good, strong bones. So that we got to do that. Second, we need to find out if you have osteopenia or osteoporosis, what is causing yours? And it's way more complicated than just you need more calcium or you need a bisphosphonate, right? We need to find out what is causing the osteoclasts, the bone destroyers, to destroy too much bone, or what is causing the osteoblasts, the bone builders, not to be making good, strong bone. It doesn't matter which one it is. We need to know which one it is, and we need to know what's causing it so we can address that. Then you need to work with somebody to help you build a plan to deal with your specific causes of bone loss. And if whoever you're working with is not looking at those tests that we showed you, there's actually no way. What they're trying to do, and I'm not against them at all, but what they're trying to do is limit the speed at which your bones are breaking down. That's not our goal. Well, I guess it is our goal. We don't want your bones to break down, but our goal is to build good, strong bones so that you can get back to living a normal life. I mean, once you get diagnosed with osteoporosis, think of the emotional consequences of this. I mean, am I fragile now? I got to be careful. If I step off the curb wrong, am I going to break all my bones? I mean, it has a huge emotional component to this thing too. So you got to deal with somebody that truly understands what is at the cause and how to solve the actual cause of bone loss. And if you're not looking at all of those things that we showed you, there's no way you're going to be able to come up with what's really going on here. You need to build a plan to reduce stress. And this is very different from what you think you're going to need to do. Well, I go out in nature and walk around, so I don't have any stress. That's not good. I mean, that's not a bad thing to do, but that's not actually reducing the stress in the metabolic portions of your body. Make sure that your digestive system is in optimal working orders, not only from an inflammation perspective, but that you can absorb, assimilate, and utilize all the things from number 1. So if you're going to take all these supplements, we've got to make sure that we have a good digestive process that will allow us to use all the things that we're taking in step 1. And then if you work with somebody that will do these 3 steps, you will actually watch your bone density increase. We have done this for years. And a lot of medical doctors say it's impossible. Luckily, I'm not here to impress them. I only have one boss, and that is my patient. I actually work for my patient. And my goal is to figure out exactly what's causing their issue. In this case, we're talking about osteopenia and osteoporosis, and address the issue, the underlying cause that is causing that to happen. That's what health should be about. So if you're working with somebody, you can take the tests that we ran, if you wrote them down, or like I say, we'll send you the relink so that you can, the link for the replay, and then you can watch it and pause it and write this all down. Make sure that who you're working with actually is looking at, make sure they understand what is really caused. The cause of osteopenia and osteoporosis is a breakdown in the bone remodeling process. That's what it is. So do you have osteopenia and want to prevent osteoporosis? Do you have osteoporosis now? Do you want to prevent osteopenia from ever starting? If you have one of those three, you need to get yourself a doctor who understands osteoporosis, will run the appropriate tests, go over them with you so you understand what's actually going on. One of the tenets of functional medicine is to teach you to need me less. Health doesn't come because you come into my office. Health comes because we work as a team to figure out exactly what's going on with you so that you can understand it, so that you can fix it. I can't make you healthy. Only you can make yourself healthy. I can help you. I can help you understand it. I can help you know what you need to do to be healthy. In this case, to build strong bones and stuff like that. But you're the one that would have to do it. So we have a free discovery appointment. You don't have to even live in Tucson to be a patient of mine. We do a lot of telemed, okay? And so telemed is actually we deal on Zoom. In fact, it's the very same program that we're doing this webinar on. And you can actually book a discovery appointment for free. I don't think you should have to pay money to find out if functional medicine is a good fit for you. Or maybe you would hate me and I wouldn't be a good fit for you. And you should be able to come to that conclusion without spending money to do that. You need a doctor. I always ask this question. Is your and your doctor's definition of health the same? So this is the bottom line. Osteopenia and osteoporosis can be reversed.